Ask the Podcast Coach for December 2nd, 2023.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music. That means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Always great to be with you, and great to be back on Ask the Podcast Coach.
Yeah, I'm laughing because all I got for Christmas was my sister-in-law's cold on Thanksgiving, and it caught me, and I'm laughing because anytime I try to be slightly energetic, I'm going to end up sounding like, Charlie in the Bucks. Yeah.
You got the cough button ready for
I have the cough button. I actually have, in honor of Bandrew, I have an empty box of Kleenex already I've gone through, so, I was like, all right, it is.
I got up there I could send you, but by the time you got it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. But, I want to thank Jody Kringle from Audio Branding Podcast, because she sent me a coffee mug. And I thought, who would get more enjoyment out of this? I know a guy that likes coffee.
I like a little island coffee this morning.
And there you go. And that, of course, is from our buddy Mark over at podcastbranding.co. He's done a number of projects for me, because think about it. If you're thinking about starting a podcast in 2024, you want to get Mark on the horn now going, hey, I need artwork, I need a website, I want you to make a PDF for me, whatever it is. He can do it all over there. He makes really great looking stuff. It really is. And then the other thing is, you ready for this? He's a nice guy. Jim, you will appreciate that. You've had your daughter on your show. Mark's daughter is becoming a tattoo artist. And what do you do when you're a pops? That's right. You're like, go ahead, tat me up. He's a great guy. He's going to sit down with you. Maybe you can get a discount on a tattoo, but he's going to sit down with you and get you set up so that you're not going to get that on a Fiverr person. So when you're ready to look great, because they see you before they hear you, there's only one place to go. And of course, that is podcastbranding.co.
Of course, big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there at Based on a True Story podcast.com. This week, he has Little Big Man, Public Enemy, and Dahmer. Although 2 weeks ago, I missed this one. I don't know how I did. The Mafia in the movies. I mean, who doesn't want to hear about the Mafia in Casino, Goodfellas, Donnie Brasco, and The Sopranos? Like, didn't that sound awesome?
Make an offer you can't refuse. Yeah, exactly. I got to do that. Never turn on the family.
Anyways, big thanks to Dan for his sponsorship. Check it out, based on a true story podcast.com.
Our first topic today, this came up at the School of Podcasting. And the question is, like, we've all discovered, hopefully, and if you go to podcasts with an S, podcastsconnect.apple.com, and if you haven't done something silly like let your media host submit your show for you, you'll see stats over there, hopefully. And one of those stats is you can see how far people listen. And somebody asked the question, well, okay, is there anything you can do to increase the retention? And of course, we asked our buddy Glenn Hebert, and he said,
don't be boring.
And that's always a good tip. Jim, do you have anything off the top of your head? Like, how do you, to me, I think editing, right? Edit out the boring stuff. But we were talking about sometimes, like, I kind of do a table of contents at the beginning of my show. Like, hey, on today, we're going to talk about blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And the reason I don't do that on this show is because, well, it's live. I have no idea where we're going. But I try to do kind of a table of contents so people know what's up. Maybe in the show notes, I'll explain what's going on. Anything you can think of to how do you get people to make it to the end?
Yeah, I think confidence. I think people can hear when you don't know what you're doing, and that's hard because when you first start, you don't know what you're doing, right? And so you listen to the first few minutes, and you're like, yeah, they're not confident. This makes me nervous. I don't know where this is gonna go. I'm scared. Now I'm I'm changing the channel, so to speak. And so I think there needs to be, some element of confidence or comfortableness, maybe is the word, that you're comfortable in the spot that you're in, that you're comfortable there. And it doesn't have to be, read or a script or, it doesn't have to be that. But I think you got to kind of feel like you belong there. And you got to feel like you're, because listen, nobody wants to be embarrassed. This is the hard part about your podcast rodeo show. And if you're embarrassed by those kinds of things, you can only make it so far in that show. And then you're like, oh my God, Dave is going to embarrass them. And then I'm out right at that point. So people don't like, when they're listening, they don't like to be embarrassed by things. And if the host is embarrassed or embarrassing themselves, chances are they're gonna go pretty fast.
Speaking of Dan from Based on a True Story podcast, if you want to see this in action, go over, check it out. He says, trying to get people to listen to the end is why I started Two Truths and a Lie game on my show. Yeah. And it works.
Yeah.
I know Joe Salsihigh, when he goes to a commercial in the middle of his show, he'll have like some sort of trivia. Like, who was the 1968, hockey puck scoring dude of the whatever? Blah, blah. We'll find out in just a second. Then they'll go to an ad. And so it's a little trivia concert. Trivia concert. I've gone to those. Yeah, a trivia question. Chris from Dealcasters.live says, recipe for retention. Tell people what they're going to get, like a station identification, then give it to them as quickly as possible. Yep, not as simple as it sounds. It's not, but that's kind of what Joe does.
Yeah, and it kind of depends on the relationship I think you've created with your audience. There are, for like a community podcast where you've got, deep relationship with your listeners. They're looking for a more personal angle on things. They're listening to it just because they enjoy listening to the conversation that's happening there, whether that's solo or a group of people, right? They're there just to listen. I don't know if you have to be as programmed if you've gone that route with your podcast. I don't know if you have to be as programmed. In fact, that may hurt you if all of a sudden you start throwing in traffic and weather on the nines. Yeah. You start doing the radio kind of things to attract them. I remember one time I did a quick reset. In the middle of the podcast, I said, we're talking with Dave Jackson. And somebody said to me later, one of my listeners said to me later, it's like, that was really odd that you this is a podcast. Why would you reset in the middle of it? And so some of those tricks could backfire on you depending on your audience too. If they just want a conversation, get there. Listen, I never tell the audience on Home Gadget Geeks what's coming up on that. I put it in the show notes when we're done, but they can expect, they've been listening to it long enough. They can expect they're going to get conversation, news, reviews, product updates, and conversation. That's what we do. And so I don't try to, I don't try to get them to the end, but those are good tactics too, to keep people listening to the end.
Well, I said that once to a radio person. I'm like, why would you do a reset? Because I always quote, Andrew Dice Clay once was like, you listening to the, okay, forget it. No dice today.
Yeah, no dice.
And no dice, man. And, but he did a reset. And she said, well, think about this though. Not every listener, like maybe they stop the show to go into the store and they come back out. You do a reset. It actually works. She goes, granted, I'm acknowledging that if you listen straight through, it's kind of weird. She's like, but not everybody listens all at one point. And I was like, that's not that's okay. You got me thinking, maybe a reset. Yeah. So, and plus you get to
just don't make it awkward.
Yeah.
Like I think that sometimes you try to do these things and you make them super awkward.
Yeah.
And people don't want to listen to awkwardness. Most people don't. Some people, ironically, I think, or coincidentally, I never know how to use those two words. Some folks enjoy hearing the train wreck, or they enjoy hearing that. So that if you're looking for that kind of audience, not everybody hates it. Some love to see a train wreck.
Yeah, Michael Butler, who's been podcasting since 2004, does the Rock and Roll Geek Show. And he is the king of self-deprecation. He actually has a segment called "Oh God, No, It's Time for a Reading with Butler," and he'll read like email, and he butchers it all the time, and so that's kind of what he does, and he kind of just the whole time is like I'm just want to play some music for my friends, so he's it does, but it's kind of his persona. You know how we all kind of have a persona, and that's just Michael being Michael. He's not, I'm going to be this self-deprecating. No, that's just Michael being Michael. So, So in terms of retention, and I think the biggest one would be editing. Go in and look. Now, again, when you look into Apple, if you look into Spotify, I believe Amazon now has this. You can see how far people listen, and that can be kind of soul-crushing. Number one, your followers, like in Apple, you can see, I looked at the School of Podcasting. I think it was something ridiculous, like 80-something% of people follow that show. So consequently, when they hit start, there's a huge avalanche because they've heard the podcasting since 2005, blah, blah. So they skip the intro and all that stuff. And I can see right where my mid-roll ad is. I was talking with Scott Johnson from What Was That Like? And he's like, I appreciate that you swap out your ads so that you're not hearing the exact same ad. He goes, but I know what you're going to say. I was like, no, that's fine. And so that was one thing we can, go in and look at those retention specifics and see if you can see. That's the thing I love about Apple. If you see, like, for whatever reason, this thing just dips, you can click on that and click play and go, what were we talking about there? Oh, Donald Trump. Oh, maybe that's why a bunch of people dumped out of a podcast about podcasting or something like that when you started doing something. But the other thing, if you haven't played with this yet, if you are a podcaster and you've claimed your show in Spotify, they did this thing. They do it every year where you can get a wrap up of what's going on. Now, you can do this as a listener, and we'll talk about that in a second because there's some shenanigans going on with that. But if I go through this, it says, it's saying, hey, people really were feeling what you did. And it's kind of a, they have all this fun graphics, ready, let's take it from the top. And so they show that speaking of your top episode of Ask the Podcast Coach, and I want to go back and listen to this now. We did an episode called I'm Not Done. And I'm like, okay. Then we were 570% more than your average episode. It was streamed, that episode, I'm Not Done. Apparently it was very popular, or more popular, at least on Spotify. Again, keep in mind, this is all just Spotify. And then we had, according to them, 72% of your listeners discovered you in 2023. And this is something I thought of. Jim, how much of a revolving door do you think we have in podcasting? Like, I know there are shows that I used to listen to.
Overall?
Yeah.
Overall. I think it's higher than you think it is.
Yeah, because I'm like, 72% is a lot of people that just discovered the show. And meanwhile, here's how you know this. When you look at your numbers and they're not going up 72%, and again, this is Spotify, but I'm like, that might mean that, 68% of the people are not listening anymore. So you're getting, it's, what's that fun, fancy word? Attrition, right? Your attrition rate. So how many people are you gaining, but how many people are you losing? And because when I saw that stat, I was like, that seems pretty high. I mean, I got 72% more listeners, but I'm like, yeah, but where's the old ones at?
Well, thinking of this show, I bet there's, I'd say probably 50, maybe higher percent don't listen every week. So right. There's a pretty small percentage even if we include the live folks, pretty small percentage of you are out here every week. I can tell by the names in the chat room. Many of you are, maybe 3 out of 4 in a month or 7 out of 8 in 2 months. But that number is pretty small. Most folks, they're not listening to everything. And then I think after a while, and I get this way, you're like, I've heard everything, especially specialty podcasts like this one, where it's podcast about podcasting. We were saying this to ourselves before you started the show. You can only say so many things. I mean, right. The content is finite. The advice can be infinite because you can always be working off, always bring in questions and that kind of creates some space. But eventually you kind of run out of things to say or things to do. And then you kind of people are like, well, you know what? I've heard all of it before. I think I'll use my time listening to someone else's, and then you go to somebody else's podcast, and for a while you're like, oh, this is new. This is great. And then you figure out they're saying the same
thing.
After about 3 or 4 or 5 months, you're like, oh, they say the same things over and over again too.
Yeah.
So I think there's that. I think there's that kind of turnover, and people aren't leaving because they're disgruntled, so to speak,
right,
all the time. Sometimes they're just like, I want something new.
Yeah.
I want something. I want a fresh take, so to speak.
You're on song 3 of the new AC/DC album, and you're like, yeah, this kind of sounds like the last 5 albums they did.
Yeah.
So the next stat they had was podcast marketing close to the click. This was where 6% of your new listeners started here. And I was like, cool, I'll have to go look at this episode and see, like, is there a button to subscribe or follow? And, is everything that I want people to do on that landing page? I thought that was kind of cool. And then our next fun little stat, it lets us know how many countries we're in. So in this case, we're in 13 countries. Of course, the United States was 83%. That makes sense. We speak English, et cetera, et cetera. And this one I thought was funny because I have a bunch of shows. So I was looking at this and they're like, oh, they like business, society, and culture and comedy. And I'm like, well, that's kind of what we talk about here. But the next one is about what music they listen to. And, now this one's different. All the other ones were like pop, rock, and I'm trying to figure out what's the difference between rap and urban hip hop. But apparently those are 2 separate, but yeah, so they let you know pop, rock, in our case, contemporary country. So that's what people are listening to. They told their friends about you, they say here. It was, your podcast was shared. And this was where I was like, direct link and WhatsApp. That I found interesting. I have WhatsApp on my phone. I'm sure by now it's been deleted and I have to reinstall it. I've used it like twice in the last 5 years. I'm just not a WhatsApp kind of person. I don't have that many people overseas where, from what I understand, it's much more popular over there. And we got a rating of 4.0. I guess that's good. And in terms of growth, they said we had 16% more listeners. We had 80% more streams and 29% more followers. So that's, I'm like, all right. And which is kind of a boost in your arm. You're like, oh, I didn't think that. But this is what I thought was really interesting. Give a shout out to your biggest fans. And this was kind of like, really? You're at a top 10 for 29 people. They're like, hey, give us your top 10 podcasts. We're going to be in that list. And then it said, we're in a top 5 of 15 people. And I was like, all right. And then, seriously? Yep, it says we are the top podcast for 1 person. Oh, wait a minute. Number 1 for 3 people. I'm sorry. I'm like, well, that's cool. So whoever you are, thank you for listening. And then what was interesting is they then give you that those people listen to 10 times more than your other listeners. And at the end of this, 66% joined you for the first time this year, which I was like, wait a minute, wasn't it 72% growth? I don't know. It's, lots of stats. And then they give you a little graphic here at the end where you can, in this case, they're spotlighting the top fan thing, and they give you a little graphic you can download to share on social media. And I thought that was here at the end. Speaking of sharing, and you can pick what color you want. So if I wanted, black or whatever, and you can kind of click on these and then download the graphic for it. So I was like, well, that's kind of fun and different and neat. But the one that jumped out at me was, I'm like, wait a minute, we have to have some revolving door here, because it just sounded like we had so many people coming in, and I'm like, yeah, but the numbers aren't going up 72%. So
I bet there's a lot of turnover in again, they listen for 6 months, a year, or whatever, and then they're kind of like, I've heard this
right
before. I'm hearing the same things over again. I've done that to a few podcasts that are about podcasting. Like, I've kind of heard everything there is to say. Now I look at the title to see if it's even interesting. Sometimes I'll do a quick scan if they provide a transcript. I'll do a quick scan of the transcript. Just say, is there anything new in there? Because it's, if you're going to give it an hour, if you're going to give it 90 minutes, you kind of want to know. How did you get to that, Dave, on Spotify?
Yeah, Rich Graham. By the way, Rich Graham is the guy that turned me on to Alec Johnson. And I'm getting my last week. I don't want to turn this into another Stream Deck Ecamm commercial, but Alec is a great guy, and Rich was the guy. Oh, you need to go see this guy, and I'm taking courses over there. Yeah. Now, you have to have claimed your show in Spotify. So you go to podcasters, and all this stuff, for whatever reason, is always plural. So podcasters.spotify.com. Now, the thing is, if you went into Libsyn, because Libsyn does that thing where they create a separate feed for all the different places. So if you use Libsyn, when you claim your show, you don't want to use your, mywebsite.libsyn/RSS. That's your normal RSS feed. Go into destinations and copy the feed for Spotify, because otherwise they're going to go, we don't have that show. And so you can then go into Spotify, claim your feed, and they'll make you do the hokey pokey and do a little, what's the word there? We have to authenticate that you're the owner of your show. And then they'll give you all those fun-filled stats, which again can be soul crushing. This show doesn't I guess it does better than I thought on Spotify, but I know the School of Podcasting does not. Bernie the cat mops it up on Spotify. And there was just a report that came out that said Apple users typically are a little older than Spotify users. And I'm like, that makes sense. But that's how you get it. And then they did a thing as well as a listener. So I got a thing. It's like, here's what you listened to in 2023. And the thing that was really weird about it was my number 4 artist I have never heard of, ever. 2 guys looking very poppy. And I was like, what? And so I'm going through just like we did, but it's for you as a listener. And about halfway through, my phone rings, he said in quotation marks. And what do you know? It's the band that's number 4 on my list that I've never heard of. They're like going, hey, thanks so much for liking us. And I'm like, I've never heard of you. And now there's a promo for this band. I'm like, it's so weird. And then they give me here are your top songs of 2023. And they're not in it. And I'm like, how can you be one of my top artists and not be in my top 50 songs? I was like, it smells like a promo.
Smells like a paid ad.
Yeah, like somebody paid for that. Because it also, I went out, now it did work. I went over and clicked their songs and I'm like, yeah, I would not have, been listening to this. So it's,
it'd be genius if it was a paid ad. I mean, you would think they would have to disclose that.
You would think, yeah. That's the old FTC thing. But I was just if
it was, it's genius. Like, that's a good idea.
Yeah. I was like, well, that's, it's a great income stream. But, so yeah, they'll show you that on Spotify as a listener. And what's interesting is I didn't realize they've been doing this now for 10 years, the whole wrap up thing. And other companies have now, I guess if you're on Pocket Cast, they'll do something similar and show you, here's the top podcast you've been listening to and things like that. So speaking of that, if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/question, which for the record hasn't been updated yet, but it's still there. I am asking people, what's your favorite podcast of 2023? If you could only listen to one show and you're on a desert island, what is it? And please don't tell me this is hard, because I know it's hard, but I always have to edit that out. People are like, oh man, great question. It's so hard. I can't pick one and blah, 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 blah. This is the one it is. I know. So
you're saying pick one before you get on
record,
the call.
Yes.
We know it's hard. You don't have to say it, but just have one ready to go.
Yeah. That's it. So,
fun.
Let's go.
Psychological.
Yeah. Oh, you know what we're going to do? I was going to go back to notes, but we're not, because we actually got somebody went to askthepodcastcoach.com/ask, and it was Darren, and he had this question.
Hello, Dave. My name is Darren. I am a longtime listener of several years. And I was listening to an episode that you and Jim did, and in the episode you had mentioned that you use a service called Toasty, and Jim just offhand mentioned that he used a service called Magi and that it was $9 a month. I did a Google search for Magi, assuming that it was spelled Magi, but I think I tried different spellings, but I just couldn't find the service anywhere that he was talking about, and I wanted to check it out. So anyhow, if you could provide some clarification on that and where I might be able to find it, I would really appreciate it. Like I says, I appreciate everything you and Jim do. I also listen to the School of Podcasting, and I will actually be starting my own podcast here in the next probably 2 or 3 months, and I'm just kind of outlining for myself different services I might use. So I really appreciate it, and really, really appreciate what you guys are doing. So keep doing a great job. And yes, you can use this if you want on your show. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for listening. And here's the fun thing, and this is maybe a good lesson. Like if I'm the guy behind Magi, which is Magai, it's a biblical thing. The three kings, since we're in the Christmas season here, were known as the Magi. And maybe that guy needs to go by magi.com or maji.com. Because I knew how to spell Magi, but if you're not, if you haven't read the Christmas story, and if you go to supportthishow.com/magi, that's MAGAI, that is my affiliate link. And that is something that I have done a lot. In fact, I just did a bunch on Black Friday. I bought a bunch of stuff around books. Different tools to help you write books and edit books and blah, blah, blah. And that is, I bought Magi. The guy probably loves me. I've probably given him $27 at this point. I've probably had it for 3 months, and I've logged in twice. I have not taken the time to get up to speed. And I think when we're talking about Toasty, I think we were just going, oh, look, someone has come up with a service where you upload your MP3 file, and holy cow, it slices, it dices, it even juliennes. And, there's Capshow, there's Swell, there's Pod. Oh, it's something that begins with Pod. Yeah, that's funny. It was something like Pod Peach or Peach Pod, or I don't know. There's a billion of these things. And I know, Jim, when we first mentioned this morning, you had tried to sign up for Toasty. Did you get any kind of I know it's like
I did. No, I got in. I had created an account at Toasty at some point, and or maybe I didn't. And I did this morning. Who knows? It was in that pre-show flurry of activities that we're doing before we get in there, and very similar. And I haven't used Magi, so maybe we just talked about it. I know I don't have an account with them, and maybe we were just talking about it. I'm an Otter.ai, and I use Swell as well. Sorry, didn't mean to make that rhyme, but it is their personal does 20,000 advanced words and 200,000 standard words. I have no idea what that means. You can get up to 2 brands in Workspace. Yeah,
as opposed to the non-standard word, like
that's what it says. Advanced words and standard words. It must be a marketing thing or something. I don't know.
Right.
So sorry, Darren. I didn't. If I led you to believe that I had been using Magi, I haven't. I did. I had been using Swell, both Swell and I pay for Otter, and I don't pay for Swell. I just use a one time a month. They give you a free plan. Toasty has a free, but you have to have the audio has to be less than 60 minutes.
Right.
To try it out. So I need to find a piece of audio to do that. But Swell did a really nice job on transcripts. A little bit better than Otter in its in getting some of those words. What I'm finding, Dave, with all of these services is as the underlying technology, all of these services were taking advantage of OpenAI and ChatGPT before anybody even knew how to say the word GPT. Like they were using, I think of there was one, the first one out the door, Jasper, right? That was, and what was the name of it before it was Jasper? Because they got sued by Marvel.
It was Iron Man's assistant.
Yeah. Jarvis. It was Jarvis.
Yeah.
Listen, they are an amazing marketing company. If you ever want to know or think about how to be successful with a launch of something, look at Jasper / Jarvis / Jasper. They were in the market. They were spending some money to make some money out there, and they were doing a ton of things. So anyways, all of these rely on an underlying, this is me generally speaking, on an underlying API layer and service they've purchased to ChatGPT in some form or another. As that's gotten better and is now that's in the public eye a little bit more, these services are getting better themselves. Now the question is, and I was just talking with Jay Franzi, who was on my show about this on Thursday night, the prompt engineering that has to go into this now is what matters. Who's the best prompt writer? They all have access to the API. They're sending prompts that they take your audio, they put it together, they send the prompt with all that stuff to ChatGPT. It all comes back and it populates the stuff in the website. It's not magic. They're not doing the AI for sure on this, right? So the winner in this will be the one who can adapt their prompts appropriately as this technology gets better. And so I think this is one of those areas we want to watch. You're going to want to watch them. This is not done. This market is not figured out, right? And so you want to kind of keep your eye on all of them. If you find one that's working for you now, great, use it. But keep your eye on the other services. They may have some things. And when they say they've got a new announcement, might be worth checking out just to see if it's. We'll talk a little bit later. I found a thing. I discovered a thing I'd never seen before inside of Otter, and so you got to keep kind of staying with it. And keep checking it out.
It's interesting too because I just got an email this morning from Deidre from Cap Show, and she was saying how we have all these tools. We're really focusing now on kind of readability. Like, we don't just want to give you words. We want to give you good words. And not that they were giving people bad words, but they're just saying, kind of like you said, we wanted to prompt to really give you what you, not only like, hey, here's a newsletter. It's like, here's a newsletter you're going to use. And so I also think Capshow has done something that, because they're a little pricier than other folks, but they're doing something that I'm like, oh, because I still pay for Capshow. I don't use it a whole lot. I'll occasionally run something through it. But they have a phenomenal community, and they're doing all sorts of training for entrepreneurs over there. Like, they just did a whole thing on LinkedIn. They've done a thing on email. They've done all these little courses. So they're feeding their community, and they're building this community of people that are networking with each other and everything like that. And I was like, that's pretty interesting, because there comes a point when you're like, oh, let me guess. There's a new AI tool. You upload your file, and it does a transcript, and it slices, and they're like, yeah, there are other people like that. How are we going to stand out? And so they've really leaned hard into their community. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, you mentioned something in Otter. What's the new thing? Because the thing I like about Otter, it takes them a while to spit it out, but I'll upload something there, and I forget what they call them. It's on the right-hand side of the screen, but they give you kind of like main takeaways from whatever your transcript was. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So what did you find?
Yeah, well, and it may not be new. I'm sharing my screen if you want to throw that up. The may not be new. It's just something new I discovered on the Wade service. I have been using them to do full transcriptions for a while now. I have a paid plan with Otter. And if you haven't used Otter before, you just dump your MP3 in there. It's going to give you a summary of keywords. It'll let you know, and I find this helpful from time to time. It'll let you know how often you speak versus your guest. We've talked about this on the show. This is how I know. Yeah. You see, it's where it says speakers there. And sorry, Jay, I talked a little bit more than you did.
Oh, I always feel anytime I run this show, I'm like, man, I talk too much. Because it's like Dave was 70%, Jim was 30%, and I'm like,
that's okay. That's okay. You've got a lot of good things to say. Go over to a little bit to the right then, and this on the screen share that we're doing, if you can.
I'm trying.
Get over to the diamond.
It's just resize. Hold on. This is where I'm learning how to resize things in when I tried. Okay, but I'm trying to show the right hand side, and instead it zooms keeps in.
Moving. Can you share full screen just on it?
Yeah,
is that what you're doing?
I'm trying, and here.
One of the things while you're figuring that out, one of the cool things, and this Otter was early. Again, they and Jarvis, that's not what it is anymore, but Jasper were early on getting transcript names in, and then you can go in with Otter, reset the name if it doesn't recognize the person. And in some cases, I've interviewed them before. We use this for some of the Gallup podcasts that we do as well. It'll introduce the name, or it'll show the name. There we go. I think we're good there, Dave. And so to bring the names in, what Dave was talking about is you have this takeaway or this diamond tab, and in that is a summary, which I actually copy and paste into my show notes. So I expand it all, and it goes through and kind of gives me a summary of what we talked about with timestamps. That's super helpful. I have to do some editing on that from time to time, and it kind of based on the podcast. How much this week was a little bit more than others, but you can see here it says speaker 2 uses J. Well, it didn't recognize Jay's name right away. I went in and fixed that, but it didn't update this summary. But the chat feature I've never really messed with, and so this morning I was like, and I don't know what made me think of it, but I just went in to it because this chat is, I can ask questions about the summary, or I can ask questions about the transcript here in this chat. And so I said, I went in and gave it a prompt and said, what's Jay think about Taco Bell? We talked a little bit about Taco Bell in the show. And Otter came back and said, based on the transcript, Jay mentioned that after a previous show with Sammy, that was my daughter, he and Jim went to Taco Bell and got the $5 boxes from the app, implying that he enjoyed eating at Taco Bell. When Jim brought up later with Jay that Jay said thanks sarcastically, that was interesting to me, right?
Yeah.
Sarcastically, right? Likely referring to Taco Bell keeping him hooked, in quotes. So it seems Jay has a fondness for Taco Bell, but was jokingly blaming Jim and Sammy for getting him addicted to it. That is not an AI prompt I've seen before to this level of detail, right? Where it's bringing in, it's implying some things, it's implying some emotions in this. And I've never seen one. I didn't know I could chat against the transcript, which is super cool. But 2, I didn't realize it was bringing back emotional cues based on the transcript. Then I said, and in the show, we talked about how many monitors I have. And I asked it, just a fact, how many monitors does Jim have? And I said, based on the details provided in the transcript, Jim mentioned having at least 11 monitors currently, but says he has counted 12 monitors previously, including his laptop. Now this was interesting too. It says he blah, 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 previously, including his laptop. He shares a screenshot showing a setup with multiple monitors and varying sizes. Now, how would it know? I mean, I did say, let me share a screenshot with it, but based on just that quick, based just on that quick reference of that, it says he shared a screen showing he set up with multiple monitors at varying sizes. So based on the information given, it seems Jim has a minimum of 11 monitors. Dave, this is a little better. I mean, this kind of intelligence about what's going on in my transcripts are pretty good. Now, here's the question: can I do a prompt like write 5 Twitter posts for this transcript? And let's see if it'll do. This would be a typical AI function, right? You could do it. So Otter's thinking, and it wrote one. It didn't write 5. It wrote 1.
Here's a fun prompt. Try, please list all the companies mentioned. I did this because I did the episode where the question of the month, and I was trying to get everybody's URLs, and everybody said the name of their show. Yeah, look at that.
Oh, look at that.
So he's got a list of Taco Bell, Oculus, Blue Yeti. I mean, the list goes on. There's probably 15 different companies mentioned. So I've done this, and then if I need somebody's, like, please list the URLs mentioned in this transcript. And sometimes it'll push back and go, I can't search the internet. So you have to say, in this transcript, please list the URLs that were, so that's a big time saver. at least for me.
Let's see if Otter has any access to the internet to do that.
There it is.
No URLs, right? Unfortunately, no URLs are provided for companies mentioned in the transcript.
Yeah.
The
But
following companies had their names mentioned, but no URLs, and then it does it again.
yeah, but I loved it because we always have people that say their website way too fast or the name of their show too fast. And the transcript was able to at least give me an idea of where to go look for this. So that came in handy for me. Now, I didn't do that in Otter. I did that in Cast Magic, but I think, again, they're all kind of using the same back end. It's all about the prompts.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Well, and I just didn't realize, I saw this chat feature and I thought it was more about chatting with your team members in Otter, because you can buy business plans that have multiple accounts associated with it and have team members associated with it. And so I thought that was chat based on, like, we can talk about these transcripts or these edits or things. I had no idea it was actually an AI engine behind the scenes going into your transcript. For me, that's a little bit of a game changer. I was getting ready to kind of dump Otter, to be honest. I was kind of like, well, I mean, it's a one-trick pony when it comes to just transcripts for the most part. Now, it's got these takeaways, but Otter's trying to be a meeting transcription service, not necessarily a podcast transcription service. It works for podcasts, but they're trying to compete with Teams. Teams is going into this space too, where you can turn on the listener. It's going to listen to your meeting and do a transcription of the meeting, and then if there's takeaways, it's going to, there was another area I was talking about takeaways. I guess there's AI now built into, and Sullivan and I were talking about this on Sunday. There's AI built into Zoom, and you can turn the AI on in the meeting. It will record you, and then you can ask questions to the AI during the meeting about what was said. Did someone give takeaways? Are there things that need to be done? What was, what exactly was said? A little scary. It's kind of like that court reporter.
Yeah.
Wait, can you read that back to me? I don't need it read back to me.
We do this thing at the School of Podcasting where we get together. We call it Lunch with Dave. And there's always, two court reporters in the room where somebody has launched this. And I'm like, I don't care. But so that's always kind of fun. Jeff says, I've tried most of these tools, and now that ChatGTP and Magi can ingest bigger transcriptions, I just use those. I am kind of starting to lean towards, if they're all kind of just using ChatGPT, like maybe I should take out the middleman and just learn how to prompt ChatGPT.
Well, that's the thing. You become the prompt engineer,
right? So
are you going to be? Listen, I like that idea, but I think I also like keeping an eye on the rest of the services because Ryan over at Swell, I don't know if that's I think it's his name. I get an email. I think I get email from him all the time. He may come up with a prompt that is just genius that he's using, and then either you buy his prompt by purchasing Swell, or you try to backward engineer what he did, try to figure out what he did to get that to get that prompt.
Yeah, DR says it's like Hamburger Wars. Every time one of them do an update, all the others rush to the drawing board to do it better. It is an exciting time. Yeah.
That's good though. You want that. That's what we want. Yeah. We want competition. This is why we don't want OpenAI to win on this one for the most part, even though they are the provider for all these things. We don't want them to win. We don't want them to wipe out the rest of the ecosystem, because we need a lot of innovation at this point. So we don't want them to go away. Support them if you can.
Well, Cast Magic has a thing now where if you make a custom prompt, you can share it with their community. So you can go in and see what other prompts other people are using. I was like, that's, again, how are you going to differentiate yourself from something when everybody's kind of doing, a little bit of the same thing. And so they're trying to figure that out. So, but it's exciting to see. And I saw, I have seen people now that have the, artificial intelligence generate and read and post the podcast, the whole thing. There's very little human involved with that. And I'm like, yeah, but what does that put out? We'll see. So
DR in the chat, before we walk away from this, DR in the chat had said, can you, her last comment, let's see, have it list the companies in order from what was mentioned from most to least. So I put in the companies. Can you list those companies from most mentioned to least? And it went right through and said Amazon, Zoom, Oculus, Microsoft, and then next to it said how many times it was mentioned. Let's see, I'm not sharing that screen anymore. Oh, okay. So sorry about that. But that prompt did work, DR. So that's a good. See, I never would have thought to say that. So DR, thanks for that. Thanks for that prompt.
Yeah. So if I hit this button, there we go. I've just seen this a lot, and the person's trying to use 2 USB mics, and they're saying, "Hey, I just started. I had so many problems with the software. I have 2 USB mics already, and wanted to connect them to the PC and record separately. So OBS was working good for the first few days on a lot of companies. There are a lot of complicated setups. That's a key point there, and yet it's all broken now. I don't know why." And I'm not going to read the rest of this. I love when somebody says this on Reddit, because Bangs just comes in and says, "Don't use 2 USB mics." Like it.
Oh, Bangs.
Yes, we miss you,
Bangs.
Exactly. But it really is. When I hear somebody like, "I'm trying to connect 2 USB mics," it just, everybody just hops in and goes, don't. Just don't. Go buy a PodTrack P4, Rodecaster Duo, something if that's what you're trying to do. But in the end, it's headaches. It can be done, but at the, expense of your sanity, basically. And so there's so many better ways to do it that don't involve plugging it in via USB, and you have so much better of an experience if you run it through a P4 or whatever, right? We talked about this, I think, just last week. There's a lot better ways to do it, and it's not that much more expensive, and it's just it's a much better experience. Do you think when we mentioned Bangs, he has some kind of something running on the internet that alerts him that we were talking about it? Yeah.
If he appears in chat, we'll know for sure that his full name, Bangs and Naughty Bits, just to make sure we get it all in there. We'll see if he shows up.
Well, here's one way to learn your prompts. DR says, "I subscribe to Prompts Daily, a newsletter that sends you a prompt a day. I've become kind of a prompt hoarder."
Yeah, after a while, I've done those kinds of things, and after a while, you get some diminishing returns because you just can't keep up with everything. That's me. Anyways, that's me. It's hard to keep up with a daily. Like eventually, I get bitter about it because I can't remember them all, and I put them somewhere, but then I got to read them again. So those kinds of things are difficult for me.
And I can't remember if we talked about this or not. Have we talked about how Apple's latest update is affecting downloads? I can't remember if we talked about this or not, but what it is, this is an article on The Verge, and it used to be that if you didn't listen to a podcast and you hadn't touched the last 5 episodes, Apple Podcasts would stop downloading your show. And eventually they'd be like, "Hey, you haven't downloaded any of these. Do you what's up with this?" And so let's say it's been 3 months since you've listened to this podcast. Maybe you were in the hospital, didn't have your phone, whatever happened, right? And so when you say, "Oh, yes, I want to listen to this show," it would download 3 months it would download everything you've missed. And so all of a sudden, you get a big old spike. Well, Apple has changed this now in Apple Podcasts that when you say, "Oh, yeah, I want to listen to the show," they will download the latest one. And so people are seeing now, especially on these daily shows, because that's where that would happen a lot. It's easy to miss the last 5 if you've got one every single day. And so more and more people are going, "I'm noticing my downloads are down a little bit." And is that for everybody? And it started, around October, November. Well, that's when that update rolled out. And so I've been reminding people because I get that a lot at Libsyn. I saw it in Reddit. I saw it in Facebook. They're all like, "Are your numbers down?" And I'm like, "Hey, this might be the cause." And then the other thing is, we're in a holiday season, and sometimes that means more listening, and sometimes it means less because some people will, listen to podcasts while they're baking cookies, and other people are hanging out with friends who are in town that they haven't seen for a while. But I just want to make sure everybody is aware that, your numbers may be going down a little bit, and it might be, due to the fact that Apple has changed their app a little bit. The other one, and this is where are you ready to get some hate mail, Jim?
Oh, for sure.
This will be great.
Let's do it.
I've seen this a bunch. Hey, there's a new studio downtown. I'm all excited to let you guys know there's a new studio, and this is someplace in Texas. It's only $150 an hour. And so I reached out to them on Facebook, and I said, hey, congrats on starting your business. It looks fun. Your target audience is not Joe Podcaster or Jill Podcaster, because those people don't have $150 an episode or an hour. And if it's 2 hours, it's $300. I'm like, because if I did, let's say, and I don't even know if that's just the recording, if they edit it, whatever. But if it was, let's just say it was just the recording, I do an episode a week, that's $600 a month. I could buy a PodTrack P4 and 2 Samson Q2Us and have lots of money left over. And so I'm not poo-pooing the idea. It sounds like a great idea. And I just said, you need to focus on companies who don't want to set up a podcast thing in their company. They have a marketing budget and that, but Joe Schmo, I don't think is, get Gallup. Do you guys have an official podcast studio? I mean, it's a big company.
Yeah, we do now. Yeah, they built one right before the pandemic for me, so it's pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah, it is
perfect timing.
It's way more than I expected. Yeah, it's way more than I expected. They were putting some new space in. We were growing at the time. This was pre-pandemic, and we were growing crazy at the time. And they needed the conference room that I had sequestered, 5 years before that, up on a third floor where we had no offices yet. All of a sudden had a whole bunch of people in it, and they wanted their conference room back. And I think the facility guys felt bad. Like, he's like, okay, I need to move you, but I'm gonna put a studio in for you. And it has really nice lighting. I have adjustable lighting on the wall. I have a office light I can turn on, and then I have some lights I can bring up and kind of mess around to get the right color temperature in there. Of course, it's wired for everything. They put up sound tiles on it to kind of keep the reverb down, and it's comfortable. And they gave me this big desk.
Nice.
Which was super cool. I was like, thanks, guys. Now, I didn't get into it. They finished it June or July of 2020, and I didn't get into it. The first time I even used it was July of 2021. So it sat a year. We worked from home, right? I did everything from home in those days. So it sat a year. I felt bad. It sat a year before we even used it. And I'm just now, to be honest, fully moving into it from a usage standpoint. And we just bought a big green screen for it to do, because the green screen's gotten so much better now than it used to be. And so we bought a big green screen that they need to install over time. So it's pretty cool. People walk in. It looks a little more impressive than it actually is. It takes just a little bit to do podcasting, but it's fun to have a space dedicated for it and to be able to do it that way. We also, Dave, to be honest, we have a big sound stage. So the room next to it is think of about 3 big conference rooms all put together, and we have pull down screens.
Oh, nice.
The ceiling is open and has got the drop down brackets for lighting and some of those kinds of things if you want to move stuff around. I mean, they did we do a lot of those, and especially during the pandemic, we did a lot of things that way. So having a full out sound stage for us was super helpful. So it is nice to have that access to that kind of, but this is one of those areas you were just saying it from an organizational standpoint, they have committed to this kind of media. And they're paying for it and funding it and doing those kinds of things and building some stuff around it, and they believe in it and they use it. Yeah. And so not all companies will. Once you go down the rabbit hole on this one, it gets a little expensive, to think about building a whole room out just for it, much less like a podcasting room. I can't imagine how expensive that soundstage was to get that all configured correctly.
And whoever is in charge of posting the show, your company show, to whoever's, whatever host, Libsyn, Captivate, Buzzsprout, Blueberry, whoever, use a generic email and make sure the IT guy knows that, because I run into that Libsyn a lot. Hey, Carol doesn't work here anymore and we can't get into the account. And you're like, oh, here's the email. And they're like, yeah, that's Carol's. We don't know where Pat. It's like, so make it very generic so that you can share that email and password. And you let the whole team in if you want and things like that. But I do run into that, not a lot, but where people are like, yeah, Joe used to do the podcast. He left, he downsized, whatever. We can't get in. So make sure more than Joe knows how to post the stuff. Get the IT guy involved in the event somebody leaves. You're not sunk that way. And then I thought this was a fun question. Jim, I'll see how long I can get through this before you finally just have to interrupt. Bitcoin podcast. I want to start a Bitcoin podcast. And while I should have the technical chops, both in Bitcoin and the production side, I don't want the show to be just a Bitcoin show. I would like to interview businesses, talk chess, time preference, and impacts on life, dad stuff, space, history, politics, community, and a bunch of others. I see Bitcoin in everything, but I'm unsure as to how to structure this. I'm currently building the studio for the podcast and have reached a point where set design and podcast direction meet. I appreciate any feedback. And I think he was looking for feedback maybe on his studio. I'm not really sure, but I just know when I read, and everybody in the group. Jim, you want to guess what they said?
No, just say it. I'm sure it was painful.
Yeah, pick a
narrow down.
Yeah, and I just said, look, let's look at this. Let's take it in a different direction. If this was music and it was jazz, death metal, country, urban, hip hop, and classical, how likely are you to find one person that's going to love all those genres? And so that was
but not. Listen, I do a variety show. Yeah. So this is kind of a variety show, just to be honest, right? I mean, we're talking about podcasting, but I mean, just today we probably had 3 or 4 different subjects in on this thing. I think it kind of depends on how you do it. And if you're creating community, not everybody has to like everything that you do. I had a guest on who's been a long time listener, and I've even podcasted with him. I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago. And in the pre-show, he says to me, Jim, I got to be honest. I only listen to Home Gadget Geeks when you have and on the show, right? That's it. I don't listen to any of the other ones. And I'm like, that's fine. Like, at least he listens to those, right? And that's scratching his itch. So I think that's okay. I think you're going to have trouble or early on. Well, maybe not, but you could have trouble early on attracting some listeners just as you're all over the place. You'll find some people though. You'll find some people who like the variety. SP says if it's space, he's in. He's going to try it. He's going to at least try it out. You never know. Like how engaging are you going to be in this? I don't think listen, what's the purpose of your podcast? If you're going to grow community, do whatever you want. Yeah. Like do it the way you want it. If you want to make money, well, okay, now you got to ask yourself your questions, right? That all the things that we talk about. Could you make money with that kind of podcast? Totally. Are you fighting an uphill battle? Probably.
Absolutely. Well, then it might be that he does that and just starts throwing things. Every episode's a new, throw it on the wall. And then eventually it's like, okay, I've done 20 episodes. All the ones on Bitcoin seem to go really, really well. The ones on, cross-country ballroom dancing, not so much. So they, maybe then you narrow the herd and just pick the topics that are resonating with the audience that you did attract.
It's a little late on Bitcoin, just to be clear. Like, we're into that's a fairly mature space, and maybe that, and again, you can do it if you want, right? You can absolutely do it if you want, but there are a lot of topics where you could do Bitcoin because it's beginning to infiltrate into some of those spaces, and it's starting to, it's getting more uses, not many, but it's getting more uses, and it's a good conversation. You can also do a variety show where you kick it off with Bitcoin and then give some updates on that and some other things, and then go into another topic. You'll attract some people who like it eventually. You just gotta get the word out.
Well, I know Craig Van Slyke from livewellandflourish.com. He's a big ChatGPT guy, and he's going to talk to a bunch of tax preparation people. And I'm like, I don't want ChatGPT doing my taxes. But I think everybody's kind of like, this looks cool. It's like you said, Bitcoin, and maybe it's ChatGPT and taxes, ChatGPT and healthcare, ChatGPT and blah, blah, blah. So we'll see. Well, I
mean, AI does a great job of comparisons, right? That's what it there's a couple things it does really, really, really well. Writes well. It also does comparisons very well. And you think in the tax world, you'd say, hey, here's a tax return I did. Compare it to 10,000 other returns. And did I miss anything? Like that would be a very good use of AI for the, and it could come back with hey, it looks like this person may have missed a deduction for the Energy Savings of America thing, whatever, blah, 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 blah. So for a tax preparer, that kind of use, I wouldn't want it doing all of my taxes, right? Yeah. But from a comparison standpoint, it may be a really good tool.
And I think you hit the nail on the head on the guy just wanting to do a podcast about everything. If your goal is just to have fun with your friends, done. There you go.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Do it. Have a good time. By the way, people like to listen to other people having a good time together in that setting. Like this is, Dave, we've gotten this feedback. I'm not making this up. People listen to the show because they like the dialogue between the two of us. We're friends. We give each other a hard time. We have a few inside jokes. We laugh at each other. There's times you say things and I just laugh out loud. And people, I'm the laugh track sometimes for your comedy, right? And vice versa. People enjoy that kind of dialogue. What they don't enjoy is really uncomfortable dialogue sometimes, or too performant. And some do, just be yourself, have fun with it, I guess.
That's it. All right. Well, I've teased you enough. I'll see if,
wheel.
I think this should show up here. Yeah. This is at wheelofnames.com. And I found this because my boss had to figure out who was working Christmas Eve at Libsyn, because technically we have that day off, but somebody always has to take one for the team. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. So what we're looking at are my $20 supporters. We always do the featured supporter of the week. And so I'm going to click this, and we do have ads. If you're wondering how is this free, there's an ad on the left, and I'm just waiting for, I'm waiting to do this and have some big giant, adult product show up. Hopefully that will not happen. But anyway, so we've got everybody on there. Let's even do a shuffle. Okay, now it's really safe and free and fair. So we'll give her a spin. And this week's featured awesome supporter there he is. He's like Beetlejuice. That is Craig at livewelandflourish.com. So thank you so much for being an awesome supporter. And speaking of that, you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/support and support the show. In fact, this month, Jim got to see the Wheel of Names early. We posted a webinar from Jessica, who did a whole thing on Canva and how to use Canva to sell books. That was kind of fun. So it's not just Ask the Podcast Coach, plus you get invited to the occasional group coaching and things like that. Go to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. Also, this podcast is brought to you by Podpage. If you want to check out Podpage, go to trypodpage.com. And if you just can't get enough Jim Collison, how can you not? You go over to theaverageguy.tv. Yeah, he's got the little green thingy right there in the background. There's that. And this right now we're using Ecamm poorly, but we're using it. But I'm getting there. You can check out Ecamm by going to supportthishow.com/Ecamm. And again, thanks to all of our awesome supporters. And when I saw the Wheel of Names, I was like, oh, awesome supporter time.
Well, you know what I like about it is as soon as I saw it, and I was like, this will be interesting. And then I watched the video you made where you're showing it. By the way, they're giving us some advice. You can cut out that ad if you want to. You could, in Ecamm, you could just show the wheel.
Well, the other thing is just to show you, because I was like, wait a minute. So if I go back and click on this, you can actually just go over here and go close the ad. I was like, there you go. That's easy enough. And it does all sorts of stuff. You can share it, and you can actually, I've not played with any of this, but apparently I can link this to a Google spreadsheet. I was like, okay, high-tech wheelofnames.com. So
no, I like it. What I like best about it is it shows every single $20 supporter in there. So every week you're being shown on that. For some people that matters, others
Yeah.
it doesn't. But you're up there, and it's a good reminder. It's a good reminder for me of who supports the show. And so you just every week you're going to show up on that, and then you spin the wheel. Then that's, there's a little bit of excitement,
Right.
who's going to get picked this week. But actually everybody recognized, right? Because you show the whole wheel. So kind of cool. I think a really good idea and a good segment for this kind of show where we are kind of interactive and we can kind of play with it and have fun and show some things and some of that. That may not be for everybody's show, but do they have a paid version? Do you know?
I don't
Can
see
you
one.
Can you get rid of the ad?
I kept thinking there's got to be. Let me see here. No. It's like, that's odd. You'd think there'd be some way of like, it's in different languages, which is great fun. But when I go to, I know that you can store, like I stored my settings on my computer. So if for some reason, I cleared my cache or my history and this didn't come up, I can reload, my awesome supporters. And even when I saw the option to share it in the cloud, it was like, no, it's still free. And I'm like, okay. So somebody's pet project. And, I was like, Rich Graham wants to know, what the heck is Squoosh? Oh, do you not know the magics of Squoosh? So Squoosh is a really cool tool. If you need, I do this all the time. Somebody will have an artwork. Let me see if I have one here. Let's go to, and it's squoosh.app. And Squoosh is SQUOOSH. And so if I go into podcasts and ask the podcast coach, and we'll go to images. And so here is, I guess it doesn't really matter. Here, 1400. So I'll open this up. And over here on the right-hand side, there's a resize button. So if somebody, wow, it says my image is 1 pixel wide. That's not very wide. So I'll make this 1400. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. But anyway, you can come over here and compress it. So I use this all the time because somebody will make a 3000 by 3000 kind of artwork and then it's 10 megs. And you're like, yeah, it's supposed to be under 500 kilobytes. And so that's what there's also, Daniel pointed me to one. It was like JPEG something. And oh my gosh, he's back. Are you kidding me? Holy cow.
Whoa!
Yeah, I told you he was listening. Not listening. He has something set up.
Yes.
When his name is invoked, he gets notified.
He's like Beetlejuice. Thrice I was named and thus summoned. Multiple USB mics are a path of pain and anger and suffering. Excellent.
Thanks,
Thanks, you, Banks.
Good
Nice to see you. Yeah, absolutely.
Good to see you.
Yes, your ears were burning. I was explaining how people do that. So, yes, DR says, I hate it when someone tells me to clear my cookies. I have to say goodbye to all my automatic passwords.
Oh,
yeah.
that's horrible. That's a fate worse than death. That drives me crazy because it's like, why should I have to really clear my cookies? Why? Tell me why. Oh, we don't know. It just works. And you're like, no, that's not good enough. Do you know what you do to me when you clear my cookies? Especially when it comes to websites, because I log into 20 different websites a day. Do you know what that does to me? So anyway, I don't get too mad about too many things, except when somebody says, "Oh yeah, you're going to have to clear your cookies." Just like, I'm going to kill you now.
Yeah. It's not something I'm happy to say, or because there are times I had somebody this week using Internet Explorer. I was like, what? Are you running Windows 98? I'm like, what? Are you kidding?
Delete that browser. Let's first of all delete that browser. It's time to get on to a mod. No, I get it. And do you have to, from a support perspective, Dave, do you have to give that advice sometimes for
yes.
folks if they're having trouble? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, not a lot. We recommend, and I don't think if I do a hard refresh, that's not clearing your cookies, right? That's different. A hard refresh?
No, that's not clearing your cookies.
Yeah, so I recommend more than clearing your cookies. Clearing your cookies is when I've run out of ideas. You're like, I don't know, clear your cookies and reboot. Let's see what happens. And we have some feedback here. Giorgio says you can actually clear the cookies only for a specific domain. Yeah, but I know how to do that. Yeah. Try explaining how to do that via email to somebody that says, "What do you mean copy and paste?" Gary says, "Boy, we've hit a nerve. We said clear your cookies, and the chat room is coming live. I have to do that every quarter with one site for content that can't change passwords without doing that." Yeah.
Yep. By the way, they're probably storing that password in the clear.
Yeah,
which is not a great idea.
And then I know this happens. Jeff is. I'm like, I know. I always tell people I clear them, but I don't. And then they move on and they fix it another way. Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
I had someone yesterday. Yeah. We had a weird issue for a while with our recording part of Libsyn, and the solution, and it worked every time, was do a hard refresh. It was something with a token not being placed behind the scenes, and people are like, I did that, it didn't work. I'm like, no, this has worked for the last 15 people, or they would go control and then type the letter F and the number 5, and I'm like, no, the button at the top of the screen that says F5, not the letter F and 5. So, yeah. Well,
how many tabs do you have open? That's what I always ask. How many tabs?
Well, somebody asked this question: what's your plan? Since we're talking about Spotifying wrap up, what's your plan to end? This was Alex Sanfilippo from Podmatch.com. He said, "What's your plan to end 2023 strong with your podcast?" Jim, anything off the top of your head?
For me personally, or just advice generally?
Well, for you, or I know for me, I've been doing a better job of, because everybody knows I'm a little all over the place. Like right now, I'm up to my shoulders, right, in learning Stream Deck with Alec Johnson. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. And then I'm going to move on to Stream Deck. Like I'm going to learn the tools I have. And we had that group coaching that was in the awesome supporters about books. And I bought a bunch of software to help me write my book. And I was like, I have like ideas for 4 different books I want to write in 2024. And I was like, hold on there, Sparky. Let's finish Stream Deck. Let's finish Ecamm. Then we can move on to books. So but by doing that, I'm writing them down. I'm like, okay, I don't want to forget. This is where I want to go. But I'm much better at being focused than I was, say, 2 years ago, where I now recognize, oh, look what you're doing. You're going to go start another new thing and not finish the thing you started in the first place. So for me, that's I want to tidy up some tutorials in the School of Podcasting, because we got 29 days left before this year's toast, and so that's something I plan on doing to kind of wrap up 2023. Anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, I've been working on the site a little bit more. I neglected theaverageguy.tv for a lot of years, and I've been kind of coming back, paying attention to more of the analytics as they're happening in real time. Been experimenting with some posts, been thinking about building some pillar posts and pillar pages, and basically a pillar page is just a page where everything else points to it on the site. I've been thinking about, and I've actually been the audio side of things from a podcasting standpoint. I think we'll just continue on where we've been going with it. I've been slowing down a little bit for the month of December. I have a procedure this coming up this Saturday that's gonna put me out for a couple weeks. So I've been slowing down on purpose on the audio side of things, just because that's kind of more real time work. So I won't have a lot of that to get done at the beginning of the year. But at Gallup, we're going to spend some time looking. I think 2024 is going to be a really interesting year for us. And so I've left. I know this is a novel idea, but I've left some room for change, right? Where I'm like, hey, I'm not at this point. Some people are like, what's your goals for 2024? I'm like, I don't know yet, because the teams that I need have not decided their goals yet. And so it's just kind of like, so this is going to be one of those weird years where I don't do a lot of planning at the end of the year. I think it'll be probably spring or maybe early summer here in the United States, here in the Northern Hemisphere, that we begin to do that planning. So it's a little bit up in the air, but I've been learning a lot about SEO. So it's been a good thing to do some writing and test some things out.
Yeah, that's another thing you can always learn. And speaking of learning, DR says, I bought a ton of Udemy courses. I'm ready to do some learning. Yeah, that's something where again, especially with Black Friday, I bought all this stuff and I was like, it's like buying a book thinking you have the free time to read the book. And I'm like, so I just started putting, like, I have my calendar and it's open for members of the School of Podcasting to book coaching time. And there's a certain period, I think you can't, after 48 hours, you can't book time with me or within 48 hours, something where like you can't book something with me tomorrow, because that gives me a chance to look at it and go, okay, I don't have anything on that day. That's now mine. And I'll put like read for an hour, write a newsletter, all the stuff that you just kind of, instead of me going, well, I got some free time, what should I do? I'm like, no, let's actually think about what should I like today. I'm writing a newsletter. I wanted to do it yesterday, didn't get done. The whole, getting sick thing kind of makes you sit down and watch cute but not very funny Eddie Murphy movies on Prime. That was I've seen Eddie Murphy.
A lot of those.
Well,
it's a lot of those.
He kind of hinted. He was on the Tonight Show. Wait, we need to. We have a jingle for this.
Oh, lovely. Here comes another 10-second tangent from Dave. Brilliant. Such absolute rubbish.
Yeah, so we're talking about the Eddie Murphy movie on Prime. And he said this on the Tonight Show. He's like, well, there are all these shows, Elf, It's a Wonderful Life, Four Christmases is one for me that I always want to watch every year. We all have our own list of holiday movies. He's like, I'd like to be in that. And I'm like, sure, those are royalties that you get, I'm assuming. And so I watched it last night. It was very cute. But here's the thing. I thought about this. Like Four Christmases has a couple scenes that I just wait to see. Elf, I'm waiting for him to go, Santa! I'm waiting for him to get in the fight with the little person. There are these funny scenes that you remember. And the whole movie was cute. And there were some really cool special effects. But in the end, it was cute. It was a cute Christmas movie. But there wasn't that one funny scene that like, wait till you see this thing. And so, yeah, it was cute.
I like the Tim Allen Santa Claus ones.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite. I mean, I like Elf too, but Tim Allen did some good Christmas ones.
He did. DR says something. This is something we should all need to think about. In fact, that brings up a good point. It sounds as though free time is a bad word. Nothing wrong with taking a breath, which is what I did last night. I was like, look, I'm sick. I need to take it easy. I'm going to watch this movie. Also, at least in the U.S., if you're having a tough time with the holidays, because sometimes the holidays just come up and kick you right in the chimney. And and if that's you and you're struggling, that's, it happens. 311. Did you know there was 311?
No.
31. I think that's the right one. Is it 811? I'm probably giving out the wrong number. And here it is, 988 support for crisis intervention.
Okay. 988.
Yeah. And they also say carry Narcan. And if you don't have Narcan, there is, let me copy this and throw this in the chat room. You can actually get a Narcan kit. And that was a thing that was kind of like, oh, I guess this is the world we live in now. When I was in Indianapolis, I stopped at the occasional rest area, and every rest area had a Narcan kit on the first aid / Narcan stuff. So if you happen to pull into a rest area and end up overdosing, you can. Oh, yeah. And I was like, really? We're going to have a Narcan kit every 5 miles? I'm like, well, that's the world we live in.
Epidemic. It's an epidemic. Yeah.
So if you are having a hard time with the holidays, that is something you can do. This is another question we got a lot of. And when I talk about, sometimes it's hard to do this show because it's the same question over and over. But I was like, but on the other hand, if we don't play our greatest hits, there are people that are actually asking these questions. And so in theory, here we go. Except that's not the one we wanted. We wanted this, which should now come up.
But you can never show that enough, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you can never show that enough.
So, and basically to boil down this question is kind of like, is it good? This is, I started my first ever solo podcast about my journey with mental health. Speaking of mental health, at the end of October. So I've been at it for about a month and I didn't have any following to begin with. It's early for me to be able to tell if my podcast is growing. Well, that one I'll just stop here. If you got 10 downloads on your last episode and you got 12 on this one, your show is growing. So that's easy to figure out. Or should I be expecting a certain number of downloads within the first month? I'm definitely not podcasting for the hope of being able to monetize one day. Good. A lot of people don't. You can just do it for fun and to get your message out there. I really think that what I've been talking about is a very relatable and can be help to my fellow depressed folks. With that being said, I have no idea if I'm on the right track or if I need my approach. So I saw that, and that's enough for that one. I thought I saw it someplace else, but it's the same question. So I always get that kind of like, hey, is this good? And so I see this a lot. And it really, first of all, downloads really only come into play. They help you see what's working and what's not. But in the long game, downloads really only come into play if you're trying to get an advertiser, right? Because if you're just doing it for ego, yeah. So, but that's why I say it helps you see what's working and what's not. But, and I always use the example, if I did the Pygmy Pony show, right? That's a pretty neat show. And if I got 300 downloads of the Pygmy Pony show, holy cow, who knew that many people were into pygmy ponies? But if I do the Hey, We're All Fat show and I get 300 downloads, I'd be like, oh, this should be more because, we're all fat. This should have thousands of downloads. So it's hard to say what's the number. I know I did a show that was purposely horrible and I got 10 downloads every episode. So if you're getting less than 10, you're doing something wrong. But I don't know. What do you say to this, Jim? Because there's no kind of like one size fits all answer.
Yeah, listen, getting visibility today is hard, right? Yeah. It was easier earlier in podcasting, but there's so many podcasts now and so much vying for people's time. And then you have to think about your own influence. What's your own circle of who do you have access to, and how can you put a post on LinkedIn and reach a couple thousand people, or can you do it on Facebook and get a couple hundred people? Can you build influence in a way where people will tell other people about it? Listen, people just don't magically find podcasts. They have to have a reason, right? You've got to give them a reason. You have to market to them. You've got to promote it in some way that influences them to give you an hour. Let's just say that's the time to give you an hour of their time, and you're buying an hour of someone's time is very, very valuable. So you're buying it. They're giving you something for that. So you gotta make it worth their time to do it. They won't do it if they don't know. It's not magical. So you got to do some kind of marketing to get it out. If early on, I think some people, folks, I'll build this podcast and folks will just listen, and you're like, well, maybe not right away. It may take some time. Use those first 10 weeks to get, we've talked about this before. Record 10 and then throw them away so you get better at it. Then the next 10, use those as your marketing. Then once you're kind of gotten good at this, then do a big launch, kind of do a relaunch, and you'll learn some things about yourself, and you'll have some material for folks to come and listen to, and then work on your word of mouth. Those are the only two ways to get podcast promotion: buy it or have someone say it for you, right? That's it. That's all you get. You can be on other people's shows and some of those kinds of things, but yeah, I think it just depends on you. How influential are you? What do you have access to?
Yeah. And you made a great point about, getting people to say it. So maybe not focus on being the most downloaded show, focus on being the most talked about show. Because when people are like, oh, did you hear what they said on, I didn't see the video yet, but I guess, I said Trump earlier, and I'm going to say Elon Musk. So we're going to get blocked on YouTube. But I don't know what he said, but somewhere apparently he dropped some colorful language, shall we say? Because I saw the headline where it's like Elon, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I was like, well, that's he did something different. I don't know if he dropped an F-bomb or what, but now people are talking about it because it's not the typical thing. So when you can kind of do something that's slightly different, people are like, hey, did you see this? Like, I remember there's a thing on YouTube, and it's kind of funny. It's kind of weird, but it's back before our time. Yes, Jim, there were things before our time. Yes, TV would say goodnight at the end of the night, and they would play the Star Spangled Banner, and it's this old black and white video of a flag flying, and I think it has the words of the Star Spangled Banner or something like that. But when they switch from like one page to the next, they would have these weird subliminal messages like, and I'm just making one up, like drink more milk, or always, you are in control, always do what the government says, or what, put on a big tinfoil hat for this. But if you watch that video, you're like, okay, I don't know if this is doctored, that whole 9 yards, but you definitely, I'm talking about it now, and I haven't seen that thing in a couple of years, but for me, I was like, that's spooky and weird, and it makes you want to share it with somebody. So try to be that, not so much tinfoil hat, weird craziness, but if you can get people to talk about it, or in some cases, just the fact that you're talking about it, Todd the Gator does a show about a video game that I'm not much of a gamer, so I have no idea what he's talking about. But I'm sure if I played that game, I'd be like, oh my God, somebody's doing a podcast about my favorite game. So sometimes just doing the podcast will give people like, oh my gosh, this is different. I can't believe somebody's doing them. Like for me, it'd be, Nintendo Tecmo Bowl was probably the last time I was really into gaming. We'll be here next week, Jim. Good luck good luck with your procedure.
With the procedure, yeah. And so just for hold on, it's just so folks know, just partial prostate removal should be fine, not cancerous at least at this point, and but these are all preventative. So make sure, gentlemen and ladies, make sure you're getting your annual physicals. We caught this 10 years ago and have been treating it and working with it. It's just now time to do some things about it. And so they're going in Monday morning and removing part of it. And I'm hoping I feel well enough next Saturday to be with you guys. If not, Dave will figure something out. He always does. But I'm hoping I'll feel well enough. If not, I'll be back the next week.
Now I have to go find this video. Apparently Elon told Bezos to go.
Later he corrected it. It was Iger.
Oh, he told Iger to go have relations with himself. In a way. So, at any rate, well, Jim, do you have anything coming up on The Average Guy TV? Are you taking a week off? Or?
I'll be taking next week off for sure. But Jay Franzi was on Thursday night. Jay's been out in chat all morning.
Nice.
And Jay and I catch up a little bit on his AI. We talked a bunch, I should say about a half an hour on some AI stuff, what we are actually using. So not just theory, but what we're actually using. And then we look at failed tech gadgets that we purchased in 2023 that didn't work. And so it was just it was kind of a fun walk down at least the annual memory lane to say, yeah, I bought this, maybe not a great decision. So that's available now, posted homegadgetgeeks.com.
And on the School of Podcasting, I actually was really fleshing it out last night. I'm going to be talking about, we talked about this a little bit today. You learn by doing things wrong. That's really, it boils down to it, and I talk about, the first time you kiss somebody for real, and when you rode a bike without training wheels, and, the first time you drove on the freeway, right, by yourself. All these things are like a little uncomfortable, and how do you overcome those? So it's not directly like, let's talk bandwidth and downloads, but it is something that a lot of people run into, because I did stand-up comedy in Indianapolis, and I'll actually be playing my set, which worked kinda, but there were a couple that were like, womp, womp, not very funny, What I needed to do was have my Stream Deck there so I could be like, take my wife, please. And then I would have just killed, but that wasn't there. So that's coming out on the School of Podcasting. And we'll be here next week and getting ready for the holiday season here. AskThePodcastCoach.com/live. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, smash the bell, the whole iron yards. And we'll see you next week with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach. Well, there we go. Yeah. So, boy, you think you got it set, and apparently I have a button that says Open Notes, and really all that is it's just opening and sharing my screen now here. And I was like, well, that's not what I set it up to do. So, still a bit of a learning curve.
Getting better at it.
Yeah. And then the whole thing where I dragged your screen on, I was like, okay, then I got all cocky. And I'm like, okay, now let's drag Jim on top of it. And that messed everything up. And I was like,
oh, that's all right.
But that's just one where I just need to open it up now and just play. Like, okay, now if I wanted to do this and that, because I want to change our background and make us a little bigger. Like, in a way, I mean, I left the bottom so we could put comments down there, but I was like, do I really need Ask the Podcast Coach at the top? I'm like, maybe just have the logo and, because we need to see our smiling faces and plus I need to add some Christmas stuff on there. So,
yeah, Christmas is coming up. Okay, I'll send you a note on probably Wednesday morning. Then I'll just send you quick in Slack. I'll just send you in the Slack group. I'll give you the hey or
yeah. All right.
Hold on. Let's see if we get the down.
Oh, there we go.
And yeah.
Can we see? I'm not cool enough, man. Oh, you know why? Because I turned them off. And in fact, I felt naked. Half this episode today, I did not have a blurry background. I'm like, how can you be on video without a blurry background? That's
I've got this spot right here that's just black because it's just a curtain covers the wall. I should do something with that. Like that's prime real estate right there. I used to have in the old days. I used to have a monitor up there that would have things on it.
Yeah, I still miss the skis.
I took a lot. For some reason, I had a guy at work just didn't like that look. And I thought I liked it. I thought it was kind of personal but he was like, no, take it down. So,
well,
sounds good.
What are you going to do? But
I took it down.
Did you survive Thanksgiving with all the grandkids? And
oh yeah.
I know it sounded like you had a hand. Your ears were burning because I had to do a Thanksgiving story at my church. So I was explaining how we used to have 20 people at Thanksgiving. And I said, kids don't know that things are going to change. And I said, I explained there was one time where my sister dressed up like a pilgrim and I dressed up like an Indian. And I said, that was the way Thanksgiving always was. And I said, and then like 2 years later, Uncle Larry and Aunt Betty moved to Texas. And then Uncle Jim and Aunt Pete moved to Louisiana. And then I'm like, next thing you know, I'm like, and this year we had 3, and I'm like, so I said, so you don't know. And I said, my buddy was saying he was going to have a house full of kids. It's going to be a lot of work. I said, but I told him, yeah, but you're like, those are the best memories for those kids ever. They're going to remember those. So, yeah.
No, it's super good. The kids really love it. And I got to stop scheduling my physicals for the week after Thanksgiving, though. my blood numbers were off the charts. My doctor was like, are you trying to eat fat? Are you like, and triglycerides were up and cholesterol was up. So I was like, okay, I need to schedule like the end of August. That's usually like August is a good month where I'm not, in. So next year I'll schedule my physical for August and not the 1st of December, or the week after Thanksgiving. That's just a horrible. I used to do it sometimes to do it too. I'd schedule the physical after we came back from a ski trip. And of course I'm just eating like shit in the car the whole way down and back in the ski trip. Right. And I come back and I'd be like, why are your triglycerides off the chart? Like, cause I drank about 8 gallons of soda. That's why. Every restaurant, everything you do. So well, okay, friend.
All right, man.
I will see you. Yeah. Thank you. And I'll see you next Saturday.
All right. Take care.
All right. Take
Bye.
care. Have a good one. Bye.